5:30, yes, I'm sorry. Don't forget to correct me, Laura, you're on top of it.
Thank you. Only trying to help.
All right, we have an invocation, please.
That's right. Lord, we just want to start tonight by just saying thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the freedom that we have to be able to meet together like this. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful city that we have, and help us, Lord, not to try to mess it up as we're doing the things that we do. Have your hand upon the council tonight. Lord, guide us and direct us and show them what needs to be done, and Lord, sometimes what doesn't need to be done. Give them wisdom and understanding and direction. We thank you, Lord, for your hand to guide each and every one of us to be the best that we can be, and know that we are blessed beyond measure. And help us, Lord, to always remember we are blessed to be a blessing. In Jesus' name.
Amen. I pledge allegiance on 3. 1, 2. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, please, Mr. Clerk.
Councilmember Bogas. Here. Councilmember Purdon. Here. Councilmember Carr.
Here.
Mayor Steinmeier.
Here.
Councilmember Corey.
Here.
Councilmember Fullick.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Forbes.
Here.
Okay. Approval of agenda. Now, we have some people from out of town and some locals. We have a senator and a state representative that, if we could move them up next on the agenda, because they're special people to us. If it's all right, you have a vote on that? Make a motion.
Second.
Yeah, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bogas.
Aye.
Councilmember Purdon. Aye. Councilmember Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Steinmeier.
Aye.
Councilmember Corey.
Aye.
Councilmember Fullick.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes.
Okay. The mayor welcomes all of you. We, the people, are the government in this country. Nowhere else in the world I know that we are the government, and we need and have the duty to participate in our government. We get what we deserve. If we're not participating, then we're not a full American as far as I'm concerned. So I'm glad to see you. We got lots of people here tonight. Okay, then we have public comment on everything except 8A and B. 12A, you come forward for public comment.
Morning, Mayor, Council, City
Sure.
Staff. Jim Magnus, live in Bonita Springs. I just wanted to comment on a couple things on the agenda. Your number 13B, resolution to designate portions of Old 41 downtown no truck through zone. Appreciate all your support on this. I do believe that this would be a good move and a good first start in making downtown Bonita Springs pedestrian friendly. The other item that I wanted to comment on very quickly as well is is number 11B. I had the pleasure of meeting the new director for Center for the Arts, Bonita Springs, and what a wonderful gal. She's got an incredibly beautiful resume. She has a lot of energy. She's got a great attitude, and I could do nothing but suggest that you approve the position for that 11B.
Very good.
Thank you, Council, very much, and Mayor and
Very
City
good.
Staff.
Okay, any other public comments? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor and council members, thanks for allowing us to be here today. My name's Don Thompson. I'm with the Henderson Franklin Starnes and Holt Law Firm, and I represent Bonita Springs Utilities. We'll be here when the time comes on item 12A, and we're going to be requesting that the council approve these special service charges that are before you tonight for the second reading. I have here with me tonight our Executive Director, John Jenkins, our Chairperson, Brian Farrar, and our Director of Accounting, Steve Richards. So if you have any questions at that time, we'll be happy to answer them.
This is the second reading?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Very good. We'll finish it up tonight. Thank you.
And again, at that time, I won't get up and speak unless you all have any questions or comments. Then we'd be happy to answer any questions or comments. Otherwise, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight.
All right. Okay, we got a senator and a state representative. Will you guys come forward and do your thing, whatever you're gonna do?
Mayor, also with us this evening is the city's lobbyist as well. Hayden is here as well to give you a legislative wrap-up.
Okay, Hayden, where's Hayden? There he is. I know I saw him here. Yes, Mr. Adam Botana. How are you doing, Chief?
Doing good, sir, doing good. Good to be home and actually doing a real job. Washington, it's a little different than Tallahassee. But folks, I want to say thank you for having me tonight. Just give you a little recap of what we've done here. We've got a great senator here, Jonathan Martin, who helped with the golf course immensely. The first time I went around, it didn't have any money in the Senate. He was able to amend it and to get it on there, so that was a big, big help. We couldn't do it without him. Just want to tell you what we had this year. We had a lot going on with, obviously, Hurricane Ian. Our district comes from Immokalee Road all the way up to Boca Grande, so Sanibel, Fort Myers Beach, and everything in between. We put in over $300 million in appropriations this past year. What we got out of it was there's a pot that was set up. Kevin Guthrie's going to run it from Department of Emergency Management, and Kevin Guthrie's been here since day one. Not to mention our governor, who's been here since day one. In addition to this, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. Out of that pot, we can pull out $117 million from everything along Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel. Luckily here, Bonita, we got some good built houses on the beach, and we didn't have as much wreck as they did. But we do have $5.4 million for the Botana Golf Course, Spring Creek Stormwater facility.
Hadn't signed it yet?
They haven't signed it yet, so luckily you moved me to the front, so I'm gonna whisper in his ear and we'll tell him to be good to go. But we have another water project in our area for Larry Kiker Preserve, Captiva Resilience. We actually even helped out the Lions Eye Clinic. That's a favorite of our another friend, Kathleen Pasadoma. Her dad was the beginning of that there. But just want to tell you guys that this $350 million that Jonathan and I brought is money that you can get now. As soon as the governor signs it, this will be available July 1st. And I want to say that we're going to go back. We'll be in session again January. We'll have committee week starting in September. So we'll go back up there and get more money. But it takes a team, and I want to appreciate, just reaching out, talking to everybody, Jamie and Jesse coming up there, Fred, all you guys, and Arlene. You guys got great staff here, always on the phone. Every time I call, they're right there. But we worked with Lee County, and also they've got great staff there, and their county commission does well too. But we all need to work together because this is going to be another pot, another pot, another pot. So there's going to be a lot to work on. So I want to say thank you, and if there's any questions you have, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions from this?
Thank you, Adam.
Yes, thank you.
sir.
We keep it short and sweet. I'll bring up the policy guy now. So bring up Senator.
All right, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hello.
Just finished up my first session in Tallahassee, and it was a whirlwind. We had a lot going on, not just with the money side that Representative Botana went into detail, but also on the policy side. I'm sure if you turned on any news station or picked up any paper in the state of Florida over the past 4 months, it was probably filled with a headline or a leading story that would have probably taken all the airtime or all the paper time for all the paper space for about 2 or 3 months, just because of the gravity and the level of what we were doing up there. The House, the Senate, and the governor were working hand in hand on so many issues, and I think that's why we got so much done. It's nice to have supermajorities, and it's also nice when the people back home support that supermajority. So we were able to get a whole lot done for Southwest Florida through policy and also financially. The money that we brought back, Adam Botana and I get to put our names on it because we represent Bonita Springs, but a lot of credit goes to our Senate President, our Speaker, and the Governor, who we know from day one was down here in Southwest Florida with his team to make sure that we had everything we needed to help recover from Hurricane Ian. The policy, I was able to carry SB 250, which dealt with hurricane recovery, and it's going to take some of the things that we learned, some of the lessons that we learned here in Southwest Florida, and provide a blueprint so that other parts of the state will have the seamless transition that is needed oftentimes between local, county, state, and federal officials to get debris removed off the roads, making sure that those contracts are in a proper form and that they're readable and understandable across different levels of bureaucracy, so that the streets can be cleared, because if you don't have streets cleared, you can't get emergency vehicles anywhere, you can't get repairs done, and you can't get people back to work. So we're looking forward to some of the changes that 250 is going to bring. The governor hasn't signed that yet, but I understand it's a priority of the governor and, of course, Senate and House leadership to get that across the finish line. It's going to provide real relief for individuals who have been impacted by the storm. It's going to allow trailer homes or mobile trailers, RVs, to be used in individuals' property while their house is permitted and they're making a good faith progression in the repair of their home, so that they can stay on top of their contractors. Their contractors won't be able to snooze and not show up to the job for a day. It'll help keep neighborhoods safe and free from looting, because it keeps the residents there, and it also allows people to continue to work in those businesses and provide support to the businesses they normally shop at. So we took some common sense approaches and allowed that will allow the state to recover faster if future storms as devastating as Hurricane Ian strike throughout the rest of the state. But I want to thank you guys, thank your team. I was able to work with Tim Stanfield and Hayden Dempsey. They were on the ball every single second of the appropriations process. Again, the representatives and senators get to put our name on legislation and drive and make sure that we have priorities funded, but they're the ones that are behind the scenes as well, making sure that the second an amendment drops from one of the appropriations committees, that I'm aware of it, that Representative Bonita is aware of it, so that we can get our requests in, that we can find out maybe why a project stalled. So they were a tremendous asset to rely on. When your members in your city was up in Tallahassee, it was great to hear from them mid-session, but it was also good to hear directly from your representatives that were up there working hard to make sure that we could return as much as possible to the people back home who needed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to thank you, John, because when we went up there, people don't realize this. Adam alluded to it, there was nothing, but when we went up there, he had $250,000. And we ended up with how much? 5.4 million. So $250,000 at the beginning of session. It's his first session. So that's a big deal. 250,000, 5.4 for us, big deal. Him and Bonita were just smashing it all session, but it's a big deal. It's a lot of money that helps us as a city. So for those of you who are listening who might not have caught all that, I wanted you to hear. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
No, wait a minute here. We're getting out of order, aren't we?
Our lobbyist is also here with a brief legislative wrap-up as well.
Okay, Biden,
Hayden Dempsey.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me and my partner Tim Stanfield here. To kind of tee off of what Councilmember Perdone's mentioned, the task that Senator Martin and Representative Bonita had coming up to Tallahassee this year was greater than I've seen any other members, coming into a legislative session. I mean, certainly representing Bonita Springs, which was significantly damaged in the storm, but they also represent Sanibel Island, Fort Myers Beach, areas that were devastated. And so I know that they presented in front of those communities, and they worked equally as hard for those communities as well. And so it really was an incredible effort, and you all and us, representing you are very lucky to have them, up in Tallahassee on your behalf. The council member mentioned the amount. When you all came up, it was $250,000, and probably a couple of days before that, it was zero. and that's just the way the process goes. It reflects the challenge, and it's meant to be a challenge, and there's reasons why that's a good thing. But we all worked very hard to get it to the number. 5.4 million is a fully funded request. That was the amount of the request. Usually in the appropriations process, there is negotiation. You come in at $1 million, and maybe you get 500, and you're very, very happy. To get a full funding on a request is extraordinary. I went back, so the budget's $117 billion, and so 5.4 may not seem a lot, but that budget gets categorized. And so I went and looked at, well, how much did they spend for water projects? How much did they allocate? Because that's where our particular project goes. That total is $433 million. There were a lot of projects. 5.4 was one of the largest, highest amount projects included. I mean, everything, all the numbers below that, there were a couple higher, but it was significant, and again, it reflects on their hard work. I want to thank you all also for coming up and for phone calls and for using your relationships and your passion for the city, of the town, to get work done, and all of that helps. And so thank you. Thank you to your staff, Ms. Hunter, Ms. Sanseverino, Matt Feeney. They were very helpful. I think like Representative Botana was saying, issues come up, questions come up. Somebody will say, look, I need to know, what's the stormwater project? I need to see pictures and whatever it may be. And they were very responsive and very helpful. I'm going to quickly go over the budget and very quickly, and Tim is going to talk to you about some of the bills that your staff has indicated there may be some interest. I'm going to highlight the hurricane relief. The legislature appropriated a total of $3.7 for hurricane recovery, mitigation, resilience. Representative Botana talked about the $350 million. When I interviewed with you all in December, I mentioned that grant programs were a bigger part of the process. I mean, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I was not doing grant work on behalf of my clients, but there's been a gravitational pull in that direction. So this year, there's $350 million that has yet to be allocated. That's going to be a fast-moving process. On Friday, the Division of Emergency Management announced training sessions, virtual training sessions that are occurring this week. I've gotten that to your staff. The portal, the application opens on June 15. And so it's a fast-moving process. Real quickly, some of the other dollars that were in there related to the hurricane: $300 million for flood and sea level rise program, $206 for beach management funding, $100 million for My Safe Florida Homes, which is something that Floridians can take advantage, your residents can take advantage to help them harden their homes. An extra $106 for beach recovery and renourishment. Matt Feeney, I think, was the most knowledgeable on that. We worked on that during session. You have Everglades restoration, wastewater grant programs, springs restorations. Some of the other, so that's all the hurricane stuff. Some of the other funding that I believe will positively impact Bonita Springs residents include $75 million for the Job Growth Grant Fund, $171 million for small business credit initiatives, $40 million for local government cybersecurity grants, $675 workforce is a huge issue. $675 million for workforce development programs across a large number of occupations, and $112 million for broadband. The only last thing I'd like to highlight is affordable housing. There was a total of over $700 million appropriated for affordable housing this year, which is a record number by far. But there's a commitment by the legislature, and it was passed in the bill known as the Live Local Act that was championed by President Pasadomo. I mean, this really has been her baby, if you will. That funding will continue, and so I would expect to see a lot of interest by affordable housing developers. So with that, let me ask Tim to talk just a little bit about some of the legislation.
Tim Stanfield, Greenberg Charter, thank you for having us all today and for the privilege of representing the city before the legislature. And I want to also thank Representative Botana and Senator Martin for all their help this session. They were real champions for everything we tried to undertake. Carly and Arlene sent us a few bills that seem to be of interest to the council. I'm certainly not going to go through this whole folder for you, and we'll take any questions if you'd like, but some of the highlights that they thought you might be interested in with the Greenways and Trails Systems Act that passed. It's a reprioritization of the current greenways and trails system to try to coordinate some of the projects better so that they don't take virgin land anymore and continue to link the trail networks together. Probably most importantly, the recurring funds for the trail network were increased from 25 million to 50 million with a one-time non-recurring appropriation of 200 millions to help with plan and design. So I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis going forward on these types of ecological greenway kind of tourist and recreational facilities. And, you know, this was a major step for that program. And you'll probably, you know, you'll see some impacts in this area. Hayden mentioned the Live Local Act, you know, really monumental change in how we look at affordable housing here in Florida, and Senator Martin's SB 250, also something that was indicated you were interested in, and really is a lessons learned type positive emergency management policy that's been adopted. There was a bill, HB 1515, related to local ordinances. This will provide a private right of action and the ability to recover attorney's fees for affected individuals that prevail in a lawsuit showing that a local ordinance was either arbitrary or unreasonable. The bill lays out definitions. It's still pending. It hasn't been signed, hasn't been sent to the governor. There's no indication it won't be signed, but something you're probably going to have to, you know, kind of learn as you go along how that's going to impact your jurisdiction and how it's going to be applied by the courts. Also, HB 383 related to public construction affects the prompt payment laws, shortens some of the timelines for response, sets up a framework for dispute resolution, and better defines what unpaid amounts have to be paid in relation to a dispute. You know, my first job was with the Florida League of Cities, and the first issue I ever worked on was public construction prompt pay requirements. That was way too long ago, so I have a feeling that, you know, we're just going to continue to see adjustments to this. This also applies to state entities, so not just local governments. HB 359 relating to local government comprehensive plans really just sharpens some of the requirements for comprehensive plan adoption and requires that the comprehensive plans have principles, guidelines, standards, and strategies for orderly and balanced future economic, social, physical, environmental, and fiscal development in the area. You know, with there no longer being, and this has already been approved by the governor, with there no longer being a Department of Community Affairs and DEO's limited role, you know, this is something that again, you with your city attorney are probably going to have to do some serious looking. And then lastly, something that affects everybody sitting at the dais here is HB 37, related to ethical requirements for city officials. It enhances the requirements for filing financial disclaimers. This has already been approved by the governor. It increases fines. This is absolutely something you'll want to sit down with staff and try to determine what your individual obligations are here. Again, thank you for having us. Always enjoy being in Bonita Springs, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Tim.
Hayden? Can you explain how Florida is awash with money? It seems like you have extra money than we had than last year. Why is that? How is that happening? Everybody else is broke.
Yes, sir, Mayor. There's several reasons. One is the pandemic boom. I mean, let me back up. You went into the pandemic already with a strong economy, with record tourism year after year, after a number of new corporate starts, and so we can track that in Tallahassee. The number of corporations being formed in Florida was very strong going into the pandemic. Everybody slowed down a little bit in the pandemic, but you all probably seen it, you know, firsthand. We've been flooded with people moving to Florida, just absolutely I probably shouldn't use that word, but absolutely, inundated, in Florida. And it's continuing, and it's across demographics, and it's, particularly the Southwest, the Southeast coast, those areas are absolutely booming. Central Florida is booming. And so that's one. Two is that Florida has always been a very fiscally conservative state. I shouldn't say always, but at least as long as I've been there, and that has helped. And so, it just makes the state more attractive. The pandemic dollars were overwhelming. The amount of dollars that the state got from the council member knows even better. It just was a lot of money. And then, probably the flip side of the tragedy that is this storm, that is, Irma before it, and, you can start naming all those storms, is the revenue, the sales tax revenue that comes in as a result of that spending is monumental. The April revenue projection, so I won't bore you too much with budget nerd stuff, but the state projects how much tax revenue it's going to get. The revenue for April was 7% higher than was estimated, bringing that to a total of $350-ish million. And that's been happening month after month after month after month. And so this, as Representative Botana, I think it said, the state has done a very good job of setting aside dollars. Before that, I know council members in the finance world, before the inflationary interest rate increase, the state was going and renegotiating all of its old bonds, all of its old obligations, going from a 3 to a 2.2, over significant dollars are saved when you start doing that. And so it's been a concerted effort. And so there was a lot of money that was spent this year. It was a record budget, $117 billion. When I first started, I want to say the budget was, maybe $50 billion. But the state has spent money, for the most part, very wisely on non-recurring items. And so this year, $433 million for water projects. That's all spending that doesn't obligate the state next year. And so the city, town gets its $5.4 million, but we don't have any obligation down the road. And so we call that, and you all probably do too, non-recurring expenditures. And so the state has been fairly wise about making sure that we're not obligating the state over multiple year period.
Well, very good. And I expect, and the government is a Republican government up there in Tallahassee. We're doing a good job, good teamwork. And thank you, Biden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mayor, could I ask?
Yes.
Bud, if I could ask a question? Or Hayden, I'm sorry.
Hayden.
I was just,
Biden, I thought he said.
oh, it's not Freudian, please. What's on my mind?
No resemblance.
No resemblance. Do you have a view, there's an insurance department hearing tomorrow on rate increases for citizens. I think they're asking about 14%. Do you have a view on what's likely to happen at that hearing?
Tim is a specialist in this, so let me ask him to answer.
Okay.
So I also am a shareholder in our Insurance Regulatory and Transactions Department and handle rate filings in front of OIR frequently. I would expect that OIR will likely approve the full rate request tomorrow. Citizens, I think last week grew by 8,000 policies, been averaging 7,500 policies. They went from estimating that by year end they'd have 1 million policies in Citizens. Now they're looking at 1.3 million, which will be a record. In 2012-ish, it peaked out at about 125, and they want to do everything they can do to reduce that exposure right now. And reality is, it's not going to reduce the exposure, but they're trying to get to where they need every policy on what's called the glide path to be. There's a citizen's glide path to rate sufficiency. And so I would expect Wire to approve that full rate request.
And as a follow-up question, there was a news article this week talking about 13,000 policies have been transferred to other insurance companies. I don't know if that was part of the 20% rule, that if somebody was willing to write and charge within 20% of what Citizens were, you were to go to that company. Do you anticipate more policies being transferred, and do people have any say in that?
So there have been 3 recent takeouts, the largest of which were 25,000 in policies, the smallest of which was 1,000. I think that round in the last 30, 60 days ended up being around 50,000 policies. The job of Citizens is to get policies out of Citizens into the private market. So that is an effort. There are a couple of deficiencies in the private insurance market right now that are delaying the ability to take policies out. So over the next 12 to 18 months, we do expect to see a rather robust number of policies come out of Citizens, somewhere in the 500,000 to 750,000 policies come out. That's going to require an enormous amount of capital to come back in the state, and also more reinsurance to be offered offshore. At the end of the day, reinsurance was bound on June 1, so just last week. So far, no private insurer has reported that they failed to cover their entire towers, so that means they'll stay in business. Citizens took $750 million in private bank reinsurance cover. And so when you put all of that together, you're looking at a bunch of people sitting on the sidelines that want to take Citizens policies out. With that many policies, there's great policies to be taken into a private company, but some of these underlying structural deficiencies just need a little bit of time to smooth out.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, folks.
Mayor and Council, just before the representative and the senator leave, they were a little modest in the work they did, as their explanation. We understand normally in the process at a staff level, we're constantly, hey, remember Bonita? There was never a moment that they were not championing for Bonita Springs and Southwest Florida. So at a staff level, you made our job extremely easy, so we appreciate that.
Okay, I guess we can move on to 8A.
This is the second reading of a zoning ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a request for an amendment to a residential plan development to include 24 multi-family units as the principal use of the property, and to add one deviation located at 04-48-25-B1-00002.000A, Bonita Springs, Florida, 34135, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Mayor, because this item and the next item are quasi judicial, I'd like to just take the opportunity now, do it all one mass swearing at everyone in the audience and swear them in, because this is an evidentiary hearing. So if you could please rise. If you're here for either of the 2 zoning items, or just may feel the urge to come up and speak, please raise your right hand. And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Council. Mike Fegun with Community Development for the record. As Mike read into the record, this is a request to amend an existing zoning ordinance that was passed in 2019. Back in 2019, at that time, this property was approved for a 92-bed assisted living facility. With the advent of COVID and a few other things happening, they went ahead and sold the property and are looking to shift gears now. So this amendment is to remove that assisted living facility use on the property and replace it with 24 multifamily units spread out over 3 buildings. Yes, sir?
Condominiums?
Yes, sir. And then along with that, there was also a request to add a deviation related to the placement of a barrier wall and landscaping on the south and east portions of the property. It is not a deviation to remove those requirements or to lessen those requirements. It has to do with the overall placement, and it has to do with the fact that they're going to have a drive aisle as part of the surrounding access for the buildings on that east side. And they want to be able to landscape both sides of the wall, both on the south side and on the side that's interior to the site, so they're requesting that deviation. The zoning board did hear the case on April 18th and voted unanimously to approve the amendment and the deviation request. You heard the first reading back on May 17th and voted it for second reading here tonight. So with that, I can turn over to the applicant to give their presentation, or if you just have questions or comments, we're here for you.
Anybody want a motion to approve?
Second. Oh, did you make a motion?
I made a motion, yes.
I'll second.
Would you still like to hear from the applicant?
You want to hear from the applicant? Real quick there, Mr.
Good evening, I'm Wayne Arnold, I represent the property owner, and based on the recommendation of staff and your motion to approve, we'll stand down. Thank you.
Roll call.
Council,
Public, open up for public hearing.
Public hearing, public comment on this?
Seeing none?
Thank you.
Councilmember Purdon.
Aye.
Councilmember Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Steinmeier.
Aye.
Councilmember Corey.
Aye.
Councilmember Fullick.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes.
Yes.
Councilmember Bogas.
Aye.
Very good, motion carries, thank you. Thank you. Now we move on to 8B.
This one does not need to be right in the title, but this is a zoning resolution for a special exception on Bonita Beach Road.
Good evening again, Mike Fegan with Community Development for the record. I'll just give a brief introduction, then we will turn this one over to the applicant to give their presentation. So if we could get their applicant presentation loaded up, that would be great. So this is a request for a special exception on a piece of property within the Bonita Beach Road overlay that's on the corner of Bonita Beach Road and Lime Street. And the request is for a car wash along with up to 17 vacuum stations for the property. Building size, you're looking at about 4,600 square feet overall for the building, and again, 17 vacuum stations. This property is surrounded by commercial property on all sides except to the north. On the north side, it does abut an existing residential neighborhood off of Lime Street. So in working with the applicant on this request, the bulk of the intensity and impact is geared towards Bonita Beach Road and away from the abutting residential area to the north. What you'll see in the applicant's presentation and also in the staff report and the attendant documentation is you have the building pushed up within 25 feet of Bonita Beach Road. They're also adding an 8-foot privacy wall on the north side that's going to be soundproofed based on a staff recommendation to help capture some of the additional noise and sound that could be generated from the car wash. And the car wash building itself is going to be about 150 feet away from the abutting residential area. So essentially, you're going to have the car wash building, a privacy wall with soundproofing, landscaping, open space, green space, more landscaping, stormwater retention, and then the northern adjacent residential properties. So there are no deviations or variances being requested as far as the building type and the building product or any type of deviations from the Beach Road overlay overall. They've met the standards as far as staff is concerned for approval of this special exception, which we'll get into in detail. And the zoning board did hear the request on April 18th, and they did vote to deny the motion by a vote of 3-2. And the minutes of that are in your packet with your green sheet as well. But with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to the applicant to give their presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Hello again, I'm Wayne Arnold. I'm here representing the property owner for the special exception. We do have a presentation established. I'll let you all pull that up. I'll introduce the property owner. Paul Savine is with us tonight, as well as Michael Herrera, our civil engineer who's been working on the project, and Jim Banks, who you've seen before, who's our traffic engineer. It is Tommy's Express. That first one? Second, that one. Yep.
Who's the applicant?
The applicant is Mr. Savine, and thank you. That's what I'll just use. Can I unplug that? Yeah, you can. So the subject property, as Mr. Figon indicated, is located at the corner of Lime Street and Bonita Beach Road. It's designated commercial under your comprehensive plan. It's zoned commercial, and it's also subject to your Bonita Beach Road overlay, and it's in the commercial zone for that. Oops, sorry about that, I'm leaning on the keyboard. So the code requires us, because we're in the overlay, to go through a special exception, which is a use that's permitted subject to conditions and meeting the criteria under your code. So part of our application did a complete analysis of each of the criteria, and we responded to those. Staff's report also addressed each one of those and found us consistent with those. But I'm going to go through a brief presentation, orient you to the site, and I'm going to bring Jim Banks up to talk a little bit about traffic, because we did have participants at the zoning board hearing, and some of their concerns were about traffic and intrusion into their neighborhood. So again, the property, it's just about 2 acres. Again, it's currently vacant. It's been partially cleared. Our firm has dealt with this property for many, many years. It's remained vacant largely because it had encumbrances with some easements that crossed the property. Those were recently vacated, which allows now somebody to have clear title to the property and can move forward with development. So Mr. Savine's firm purchased the property in the last year or so and want to move forward with the car wash that we're proposing tonight. Not sure why that's not advancing, but maybe I can get some IT help. It's not advancing on the screen.
Gordon.
There we go. Start over. There we go. So the subject property today, it's zoned C1A and CS1. Again, both already zoned for commercial uses. Your overlay is unique in the sense that it gives other development rights to many other uses as well. So car wash is a special exception, an indoor self-storage use is a special exception, a gas station would be a special exception, but there's a whole host of other uses that are permitted by right. Without asking, we'd go directly to development order, and those could be things like medical offices, restaurants, a lot of business services, daycare centers, health facilities, and things of that nature that are permitted by right without coming to council to ask for permission. So in this particular site, this is our conceptual site plan on an aerial photograph, and I'll take you to another slide momentarily to talk about this in a little more detail, but these are the dimensions that we've talked about on the, just orient you from the north to south. We have along the north side the traditional landscape buffer that's required. We have varying setbacks to our building and improvements, but the largest feature that we provided is a 8-foot wall that completely surrounds the development boundary. Mayor, I know you attended the zoning board hearing, and I'm not sure if others did, but there was a request by the Connecticut folks to remove a segment of wall that we returned down here, and I've got a slide that shows where that segment is, and we're happy to remove that. I think this is a little easier exhibit to talk from, and one of the things Mike mentioned, there are unique buffer requirements that apply for car washes. So along the Bonita Beach Road frontage, you have an undulating berm with a heavy landscape buffer that extends all along the beach road frontage and then wraps around Lime Street. What this area to the north of the driveway area, this is all floodplain compensation, open space, and landscape buffers. So that's how we've achieved the large setback from the nearest residences located up here and here. So all the improvements, as Mike mentioned, are located here. We originally submitted the plan and had these vacuum areas over on the west side of the property. And in working with staff, they had a good suggestion to increase on-site circulation. So we were able to flip the building and the vacuums and have an area so you come into the site on Lime, you come into the staging area, you pay your fee, you go into the tunnel, you come out, and you can proceed to the vacuum area, and then there's an exit only. One of the discussions that came up.
A second there.
Yes, sir.
That northern part, the green part, what
Yes.
was that again now?
So part of this is just general open space, landscaping, and floodplain compensation. So
Floodplain compensation.
yes, and I can have Mr. Herrera come up and speak to that a little bit more, but basically, a lot of the city's in a floodplain, so when you impact land that's in a floodplain, if you build up any area, say I have to add a foot of fill to meet your FEMA requirements, I have to take away a foot to compensate for that fill. So this area gets scraped down a little bit in that area. We scrape it down a little bit, revegetate it, And then this area gets filled to support the building and some of the parking.
And your water cut, I've got some recent pictures, and the water needs to go underneath your sidewalk on the north side.
Yeah,
Get into there.
so one of the things that we're required to do we have to accept any current off-site flows of water that come onto the properties. So we have to design our on-site water management system to accommodate any flows that are flowing from the north to the south in this instance. So they'll be retained on-site before they're discharged into Bonita Beach Road right-of-way. And I can have Mr. Herrera, if you have other more specific questions, to come and address that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. But, so from a site standpoint, the most intensive uses on the site of the car wash, this is the tunnel building, this would be obviously the dryer area, and then these are the vacuums. So all of that activity has been focused to Bonita Beach Road, which obviously the road is significant traffic volume. It already carries a lot of ambient noise on the site. We did do a noise study at staff's request and determined that we will stay within your noise levels if this site is developed with the car wash. So those were all factors in staff's support of approval of the project. This area on the left, it says no wall along the western boundary. This is the area that the Connecticut neighbors asked if we could remove it. They were concerned that it might provide some visibility issues for their signage and building. And it's obviously adjacent to a commercial use. We don't feel that it's necessary. I think staff agrees that it's not necessary, and we would certainly eliminate that use to help support that neighbor's request. We created some building elevations, so there'll be glass along the side facing Bonita Beach Road. You've seen other car wash proposals in the city. They've achieved your architectural standards. One of the things that we also did early on, we created some cross sections at staff's request to show just generally what some of the views would be. And one of the significant features that highlights is in this particular area, it's hard to move this, but this is our 8-foot wall. So all along the travel lane that we've proposed is that wall that extends all along here. Instead of putting the wall up on our property line, we put it closer to where the noise is included. And also staff has made a recommendation that we're supportive to look for additional sound deadening that we can install at the time of site plan approval. There's a lot of new fencing standards and noise attenuation methods. I'm sure you've seen some of those with pickleball courts, for instance, that there are different ways to shield the noise associated with those activities, in the same way it goes with just the ambient noise associated with it's anything from generators to car washes to just other noise activity. So at our meeting, we heard a lot about traffic and conditions on Lime Street. I think I'd like Jim Banks to come up and just speak for a couple minutes about the traffic analysis that he prepared and some of his professional observations about Lime Street. So Jim, just advance with that, and if you need the aerial, it's a couple slides forward.
Okay.
Okay?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jim Banks. My firm prepared the traffic study for the Tommy's Car Wash. The traffic study was prepared pursuant to the criteria set forth by the City of Bonita Springs. And your staff reviewed that report and agreed with its findings and conclusions. And the findings and conclusions are that Tommy's Car Wash will not negatively or significantly impact the adjacent road network, and that there's adequate capacity to accommodate the traffic that will be generated from the site. As part of preparing the traffic study, we did obtain traffic counts at the intersection at Bonita Beach Road and Lime Street, as well as collecting traffic counts on Lime Street. And we established that during the peak season, during the peak PM peak hour, which is when the greatest demand occurs, the traffic demand on Lime Street is about 70 trips. It's a little bit less than 70 trips. That's the current peak season PM peak hour demand on Lime Street. And with the completion of Tommy's and the volume of traffic that Tommy's will generate, the total combined traffic of what's there today and what Tommy generates would be approximately 110 trips, which represents 18% of Lime Street's road capacity. So that means there's 82% of the road's capacity that is not being used with the completion of the Tommy's Car Wash. It's also important to consider the fact that this site is already approved for other permitted commercial land uses. And those commercial land uses have the potential to generate more traffic than what the Tommies would generate. The type of uses that could be developed today without going through this hearing process include retail uses, restaurant uses, medical, and certain business types that would generate more traffic than what the Tommies is going to generate. So I think that is an important consideration for the city council of what other uses could go on this site and that are approved for today. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
How do you figure how many uses Tommy's is gonna have?
It's based on the ITE trip generation rates.
I know what?
The Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, which is based on surveys conducted at existing land uses. It's the traffic engineer's Bible to determine how much traffic certain land uses would generate. And that's how we reached the same conclusion that other land uses would generate more traffic than a Tommy's, is because there is substantial surveys at retail uses, restaurants, medical uses, and that type of thing. And so we have a good statistical understanding of how much traffic would be generated by a specific land use based upon the size of the land use.
Do you have specific for car washes?
Yes, we do. Yeah, there is a specific ITE category for a car wash just like this, where it's the single tunnel where you drive, where it's automated. They also have them for where you pull up and you have the spray wands, and you can do it that way too. But we based it upon the trip rates that are established for an automated car wash as being proposed here today.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Now, the proximity of the car wash to Bonita Beach Road and the type of traffic it generates. In other words, the car wash is going to be some of the traffic that is captured by the car wash are actually people that are already on the road, either already on their way to work or some other destination. They pull in and they have their car washed and they continue on to their destination. That's considered a captured trip. In other words, it really didn't generate that trip. You didn't get up off your couch, get in your car, drive to the car wash and get your car washed. You did it on your way to another destination. So it's important to understand that that's the kind of traffic that this will generate. It's less of a destination type land use and more of a captured trip type destination. But again, it's close proximity to Bonita Beach Road, and the fact that Lime Street is a full intersection, a full access intersection onto Bonita Beach Road. The traffic that is generated by this site will enter and exit by Bonita Beach Road and that short segment of Lime Street between where the site will have access and Bonita Beach Road. That's going to be the segment of Lime Street that this project would impact. And during the Planning Commission, some of the residents expressed their concern that they thought that some of the traffic would actually use their streets, their local streets, in order to gain access to this car wash. And I submit to you that's just not a logical route. In other words, people pick the most convenient method of ingress and egress, no matter where it is you're going. You almost always certainly pick the most convenient method and the most convenient route. And I'll just touch upon this real quick. So the site is located here. They have full access onto Bonita Beach Road. So if you want to, if after you have your car washed, you want to head eastbound on Bonita Beach Road, you can either turn left out on Bonita Beach Road and head eastbound. And during the more critical hours when the demand is greater, and we did observe this when we were out there, some folks will turn right out onto Bonita Beach Road and they go down to the next intersection, which I think is East Oaks. And that is that's a directional left turn lane there. It's a very low volume because I think it serves like 10 homes. And they'll make the U-turn there at that intersection and then head east on Bonita Beach Road to either turn south to head south on Imperial, turn left to head north on Imperial, or continue on eastbound. The residents, what they were concerned with and what they thought might happen is somebody that wants to head eastbound on Bonita Beach Road or northbound on Imperial would actually turn left out onto Lime Street, head up this 2-lane local road, and either then travel eastbound on this on Orange Blossom, which is also a two-lane residential road, or go up and then turn right on Tangerine. And again, that's a two-lane local road. But when they get to Imperial Parkway, they're forced to turn right and head southbound on Imperial Parkway. So if they were planning on going northbound on Imperial, they'd have to come down to this intersection, which is dual lefts, to try and make a U-turn at the signal. I submit to you, that's just not a convenient route for egress compared to simply turning left out on Bonita Beach Road or going down 300 yards and making a U-turn. That's just not a convenient. I guess I want to say is that their concerns, I'm not dismissing that they have the concerns, but it's just not logical. And I want to be clear. I'm not telling you that nobody would do that. It would just be a very rare occurrence if somebody did do that, and I think they'd only do it once. I think we've all taken a shortcut in our life and found out it really wasn't a shortcut and go, you know what, I'm never going to do that again. Now, with that said, if we do some of these other land uses, a restaurant, retail, or medical, you might actually have that same, what I'm considering is a rare occurrence, would also happen at those kind of uses as well. Again, I think it's a rare occurrence. I don't think it is truly something that is going to happen. With that, I conclude my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Lime Street does not connect with Dean Street?
It is not. It is barricaded. You cannot travel from Bonita Beach Road up to Dean Street on Lime Street. I understand part of that.
You can go down Dean Street to Livingston.
To Imperial Parkway, yes, sir.
Imperial Parkway.
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay. The map shows it going across, but you say it's barricaded.
It's barricaded. As I understand, a section of the road is private, and it's been barricaded.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Yes.
On your slide with, which is my page 14, your background traffic and patterns, future demand is placed or shown to be 107.
Yes.
Current demand is 68, difference of 39. Is that saying that during the course of a day after the facility is built, you expect 39 cars to go through the car wash?
Yes, sir. It's 30, yes, sir.
And so to support 39 cars going through the car wash, we're building 17 vacuum stations. Something doesn't seem quite right.
Well, it usually takes a little longer to vacuum your car than it does to go through the automated car wash. So that's kind of it's a rate of processing versus how long it takes you to vacuum your car type.
I'm just wondering if really they're building 17 vacuum stations because they figure over time that vehicle count is going to go up and they're going to have more business there than the 107 would indicate.
Yeah, I understand your statement, but again, we base it upon surveys that are conducted at other car washes, and this is the typical demand that occurs at a car wash.
Can you make a living on 39 cars?
That's it. That's in 1 hour. That's in the PM peak.
In an hour, huh?
That's in the PM peak hours.
He said it was all day.
No,
Vehicles per hour. Just per hour per day.
yeah, well, it's the highest peak hour of the day would be 39 vehicles entering. And that's typically, when you think about it, people are leaving work and they would, again, as I was explaining, pass by traffic, they would pull in, wash their car, then head on home or wherever it is that they're going. So that is when the peak hour does occur, is in the PM peak hour at these car washes.
Can I ask you about the noise?
I'm not a noise expert, so I would have to turn that back over to Wayne.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Will we be able to ask questions after public comment? Because I'd like to hear from the public, but I do have questions. Some of those might be hitting public comment, so I kind of wanted to hear from the public, and then I'd like us to be able to have a chance to talk to them and see, where we might have some
I'm
input.
asking questions that come up that you might not have to repeat.
Right, exactly. Yep.
I'll take care of this. Okay, thank you.
And Wayne's going to conclude our presentation.
Thanks, Jim. So I just had a few more things. I wanted to go over some of the criteria that are required. So we were all sworn, it's quasi-judicial hearing. So there are criteria in your code that we have to meet in order to move ahead. And if we're found to be inconsistent with those criteria, then we shouldn't move ahead. So the criteria are listed on this slide. It's A through J, your staff report. Mike did a really good job. I want him to come up after us and go through his analysis of those criteria, because I think you need to hear from your staff why they were supportive of our application. But we also answer those questions. And you know, in this particular case, it says, are there changing conditions? Well, in 2019, you all did adopt the Bonita Beach Road corridor overlay that requires us to go through this special exception process. You did a similar effort on US 41, because you now have an overlay there that also requires certain uses to go through special exception. And it has totally different criteria than these that apply to Bonita Beach Road. But these are the ones that apply to this special exception. So it's the Bonita Beach Road corridor overlay you adopted that is the changing condition that brings us here. You've heard our testimony, my professional planning opinion. Mr. Banks is a professional traffic engineer. Mr. Herrera had a water management report that's part of the presentation. And we are consistent with your comp plan, which is the other criteria. So you've heard us. The testimony from the public you have to consider, but you have to consider the testimony that's based on the fact. I mean, there's a lot of emotion. I've dealt with zoning cases for 30 years, and there's a lot of emotion associated with them, but you have to weigh the emotion from the facts. And I think in this particular case, a lot of the traffic, we hear that on 99% of the zoning cases that I work on in Southwest Florida. It's traffic, it's drainage, it's buffers. And it's hard sometimes for lay people to comprehend the change, but the change is going to happen. It's a commercially zoned piece of property. Whether you approve the car wash, which we hope you do tonight, or you don't, and somebody has to develop it with some other use, there's going to be an impact associated with Lime Street because of the traffic associated with commercial uses. It's just not going to become a single-family home in that corner. I think that's impractical to think that would occur. So again, the comp plan, we're designated commercial. We're consistent with those commercial uses allowed. We're consistent with the heights. We're consistent with your land development code. There are no deviations that are associated with our request. So we're meeting those standards of your code. Are we going to conserve environmentally critical habitat? Well, there is no environmentally critical habitat. There's a heritage tree on the site which we'll work to save. It's in the floodplain compensation area. If it can be saved, we will. If not, we'll go to the tree advisory board and see what their recommendation is for replacing that tree and what ratio that would occur at. Compatible with existing and planned uses. We think the site plan that we've presented with the wall that we've placed, 8-foot high wall, with the additional sound attenuation that staff's asked us to provide, and the placement of the vacuums and all the noise associated with the project to be located closer to Bonita Beach Road. The noise study, which none of us in this room are the noise expert, but the noise study that Mr. Savine had prepared shows that this will operate within the decibel levels for any other commercial use in the city, which your code says we have to operate within. Will it cause hazard or nuisance to persons or property? We think the fact that we're complying with everything in the land development code, we're not going to provide that nuisance. And then you heard Mr. Banks talk about the impact on Lime Street, and I agree that Lime Street becomes private at a certain point, and if you've driven out there, there are rocks that have been placed across the road at about the point where it's become private, and if you go on the Dean Street side, there are concrete barricades that have been placed there to keep cars from turning off of Dean Street onto Lime. And I don't know the history of any of that. I know that Mr. Dulmer and I have had that conversation. He's unaware of the full history of when that occurred, how it occurred. There's no record of development orders, but there is a private section of that roadway, and the owners of that road have taken it upon themselves to put the rocks and stones there. And I know one of the gentlemen talked about there are other people that have try to drive up that street thinking that it connects, but it doesn't. And one of the things that we talked about to try to lessen any impact, it came up at the zoning board and obviously didn't get full consideration from them, but would it be enough to put a right turn only sign at our driveway entrance to make people go back to Bonita Beach Road? We even offered, would it help if we built a raised median that steered people to only make a right turn? I mean, that clearly inconveniences any neighbor on Lime or any of the other streets that might want to utilize our facility, but nonetheless, I mean, those are the measures we're willing to take because we really think that those movements to turn left to go north onto Lime Street are really minimal. And it's someone who's a seasoned person in Bonita is probably not going to take that route, as Mr. Banks testified, because it's just not your normal convenient route to get to the property. It's in compliance, as I mentioned, with all the other provisions of your code. And it is compatible with surrounding zoning. As Mr. Fegan mentioned, we have commercial on the other side of Bonita Beach Road. We have commercial uses east and west of us. And I will just say that we had folks from our office monitor traffic, looking at the impact of the retail and the facilities that are, if you look at Bonita Beach Road, you have Walgreens at the corner, you have a dental clinic, you have a couple of strip center that's got a Pilates studio and some other uses in it. In our observation, not one single person turned right out of those driveways to go north onto Lime Street. So I can't say it never happens, but in our observation, it did not happen. So we think that similarly, our site would not generate traffic that wants to turn left out of here. So with that, I'm going to stop and like staff to come up and go through their presentation. I think you'd all benefit from hearing that, and I think that.
City manager, could I have public comment at this time?
That's it.
I would recommend, again, for the public's benefit, if you're gonna hear the staff presentation, have the staff present first.
Do we have many people here for,
Or can we make a motion to approve and,
You can
because
make a-
I motion to approve.
You can make a motion at any time you want. The two questions, and I question whether or not it matters from timing perspective, is when the public gets to speak, and if you want to hear from your staff presentation. Whether you flip those two about, you're still talking about the same amount of time before a decision is reached. And obviously, the members of the public, after they speak, still want to remain to hear the outcome.
I'd like to hear the public.
Ditto.
I'd like to hear the public, so we get everybody involved, if it's okay with everybody else. Can we have public comment? At this time, please come forward.
Good evening.
My name is David Fox. I live on Lime Street, and we are going to be very affected by this.
Let me ask you a question. Now, you have this 97 petitions.
I brought that in last time. You guys have possession of that.
We have them now?
I don't know if it's here, but it was, I presented it to you at the last meeting, and you have that petition. Yes, sir.
The city clerk.
I don't have it in the,
don't have it.
I don't have it in the clerk's office.
It was presented here at the last meeting, as you remember, and it was 97 residents of the general area said no, and that was on the petition. I did the petition, and only 3 people said yes.
And you don't remember who you gave it to? 'Cause
I don't know, it was somebody at the council. It may have been this gentleman, but I can't be certain.
we haven't,
Well-
it's important to me.
I understand, and citizens have the right to petition their government, but with respect to a quasi-judicial hearing, unless that petition has something to do with any of the findings and criteria listed, I don't know, that's dispositive towards the question here.
I'm disappointed, but anyways, I guess.
I mean, last I had it, it was presented to this board at that last meeting. And then at the zoning board meeting, I'm sorry.
To the zoning board, yes.
Yes, sir. So that's why you guys don't have it, and I assumed when I turned it into the zoning board, that was the right thing to do.
I was surprised I saw that we didn't have it.
Yes, I mean, well, it was the signatures, I didn't reproduce them.
Okay.
So that was the original copy, I did not make a copy of it. But if,
Mr. Mayor, this is a time for public comment.
Okay, I'm really disappointed that they're not available, that we lost them. That's
Yeah.
petition, because that's important, you're allowed to petition in this country.
correct,
The
and
government, and I thought, you did 97, and then it didn't show up, clerk says we don't have it.
And what happened to it after we presented it at the zoning board meeting?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I turned it in to the members of the zoning board, and like I said, I assumed that it's part of this case. So it would remain with this case.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
may we proceed with the
Talk to
impression?
the microphone or something.
May we proceed with the understanding that we all are of the belief that there was a petition with 97 people on it that we can't find right now, but we are all of belief that this was turned in at zoning, and then he can just get back to his comment, but that way at least it's on the record, it was there, and then we can, and, you know, after it's over, we can figure out, you know, what, we can run it back down. But for now, I'd still like to hear what he has to say about it, so I don't want the petition to kind of rain on that, so, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jesse. Yes, sir, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, I understand.
Work it out.
I'm a rookie at this, so bear with me. My concern is the discharge of water, because that was not addressed, and that is a very big concern for us. Some of the people that live on Lime Street, their homes have been flooded in recent hurricanes. So one of the options that was presented to the residents of Lime Street was putting in detention ponds. One of the areas for the detention pond, and I believe you spoke about it at the last meeting, is in the exact location where they wanted to put this car wash. And we, at the last meeting, we were told it would be 60 vehicles per hour that were going to go through that at peak. Not, what did he say, 37, 47? So, and what is the percentage of the water that is going to be wasted? Because they're only recycling 20% of the water. And again, these are facts that were given to us at the last meeting, at the zoning board meeting. And the traffic study, when was that report done? It was done after COVID, and it was done in the off-season. It wasn't done at peak season unless another one had been done, and that's where I'm getting my number of 60 vehicles per hour. They tried to present it as it was only 37 vehicles. No, 37 vehicles an hour on it's a residential street that abuts a commercial property. But we paid to have that road paved, and 40% or 60% of that road was paved by the citizens. So to have a business that is that much traffic coming in and out of a residential street, it may be on commercial property, but it's a residential dead-end street. So, and the fact that people, we all get lost. I'm sorry, I've gone down the wrong street more than once, made the U-turn. We don't need to have that. And how many children are on Lime Street and people are frustrated because they made a wrong turn? And yeah, like I said before, we suggested a turn lane, but there is no way, there is no room to put a turn lane for the car wash. We don't have a problem necessarily with the car wash as much as the traffic pattern where it's turning into our street. There's one way in, one way out off of Bonita Beach Road. You can go down the finger streets as he suggested, but why are you redirecting my route? If I want to go to Home Depot and I want to take a left, why is that an issue? Because I don't want to have to dance around this. The other thing I have is with the vegetation they're proposing to put on the corner of that road of Lime Street and Bonita Beach Road, will that block off vision for the motorists? Because I saw a lot of trees. I didn't see the whole study, just what he had presented this evening. And these are questions that I speak for the residents of the city of Lime Street. And like I said, I was the one, I knocked on every door and I got every signature. So when I tell you this, and you know, my position with the county is a building inspector, so I'm not just some fly on the wall. I know how these things work, and this thing should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for me before I step down? Thank you.
Yeah, we try to refrain from applauding it and inhibits the other people. Anybody else, please? Come on, I got more than one person call me up. Yes, sir.
Good evening.
My name is Brian Rulin. I live on Lime Street as well. There's a couple of things I like that they attempted to address some of the traffic concerns. That's what I see as the biggest nuisance. When they said they're capturing traffic, I don't believe they're capturing traffic from Lime Street. They're capturing it from Bonita Beach Road and directing it onto Lime Street. That's where I see the problem. There's gotta be a reason that we didn't want an entrance on Bonita Beach Road into the car wash, and I believe that's because of the traffic on Bonita Beach Road. So now we're gonna take all that traffic and put it on our 2-lane residential road. I'm sure you guys probably live on 2-lane roads. Could you imagine, what was it on the screen? I think it was 107 vehicles per hour per day down your street. That's a nuisance. I don't know how you're gonna get to your work on time, how you're gonna get home from work on time, how your elderly neighbors are gonna receive essential services. That's my biggest complaint, is that I believe it's gonna be a nuisance. And as far as making U-turns to travel the other way, you literally have to cross 3 lanes of traffic to get to the median to make the U-turn, if you can even make the U-turn, because the traffic's always backed up going to the interstate at that time of day anyways. So that's what I got to say about it. I'd appreciate your consideration on the traffic.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on, honey.
Not you, Mike.
My name's Elizabeth Murray. I live on Lime Street for 24 years. And the traffic is a problem. It is truly the worst scenario you can imagine, because if you're coming from the west, it's not so bad to cross over 3 lanes of traffic to get to Lime Street. But if you're coming from the east, believe it or not, it's really bad, because the lines of traffic, they don't realize that you're taking a right turn onto Lime Street for some reason. They've gone through that intersection at Imperial, and they're gunning it, okay? And there's 3 lanes, and then I have to start putting my signal on almost at the corner of where Walgreens is at Imperial, to make sure everybody knows I'm making a right turn, because I've had the experience that they will hit you. They will hit you. They just will. I don't know where their minds are. But the other thing is, people coming from the west and going to Walgreens, they can't hit Walgreens. They'd have to go all the way onto Imperial, go down, make a U-turn, come back, and go to Walgreens. So now you're talking about them using that entrance at Lime Street, where they want to put the car wash. These people come that way, and they take a right onto Orange Blossom to go to Walgreens. That's a lot of traffic to go to Walgreens from the west, okay? So that's just, it just keeps on getting worse and worse when you put more traffic, and there's children involved here. We're talking, there's no sidewalks for them. They're riding their bicycles, and they don't know. It's just dangerous, and it's not worth it. Trust me, it's not worth it. Not to mention the flooding. That's another story. We got flooded out and had to live in a trailer on our property, just like they're doing at Fort Myers Beach, so.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it wasn't fun.
I'm still homeless myself.
8 months of that was not fun.
I'm homeless myself.
Oh, really? Oh, bless you. I know how that is. But, there you go. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. You want one more time.
I just have one comment.
You gotta be near the microphone. I'm not supposed to let you do it twice, but I'll let you go today, because we lost your petitions.
Okay, so that makes it simple. Line J, it says that it needs to be in compliance with all zoning and provisions. It's not. That's why we do not need the special exception.
Any more public comment, please? Okay, here we go. Community development, you have a rebuttal?
Okay, good evening. Mike Fegon again for the record with Community Development. I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit here on my presentation because usually we do the applicant, then staff, then public comment. So I'm going to try and pivot a little bit and see if I can incorporate some of the public concerns into my presentation, see if I can address some of that as we go along as well.
You want to do that?
So the staff review team that reviewed this particular request, as you can see, we put it through its paces with all aspects of disciplines from planning, bike ped, surveying, engineering, which also deals with stormwater, environmental, our city's traffic engineer, the city architect, and Lee County DOT. We got the county involved because, as you know, that portion of Bonita Beach Road is maintained by Lee County. So the request, as I think we're all familiar with, we don't need to go ahead and expand on that. We know this is for a car wash and 17 vacuum stations, and that under your current code provisions of the Bonita Beach Road overlay, it requires this special exception application. And I think we are also familiar by now of exactly where this property is, where you have the two parcels here that front Beach Road, and one of them also fronts Lime Street, and then your residential neighborhood to the north there. So one of the unique things that we have about this particular project has to do with the advent of the 8-foot wall, which we have outlined in green right now on this particular piece. And the fact that there is going to be a staff condition at staff's request to also include additional soundproofing and sound deadening on the interior side of that wall to capture additional sound from bleeding into the residential neighborhood to the north. When you look at the noise study that was conducted by the applicant, it was used at one of their already built facilities that's similar in size to this one in another state. And what they did was they took the results of that particular noise study and combined it with noise readings that they took for this property specifically. And what you got there is sort of a meld of the two, and it gives you their educated guess, if you will, of what the noise levels would end up being from a calculation standpoint. And without the advent of the wall being in place, it's their position that at this point right now, the majority of the decibels that you're seeing if you were to go out there right now would be background noise from Bonita Beach Road. So the fact that you would actually have this 8-foot wall with soundproofing could potentially lessen the decibels that make it to that northern property line overall, and that's what their noise study tends to suggest. And based on the type of noise material used, staff could support that being the case as well. In addition to the wall, you also have the car wash building itself, which is located about 150 feet from that residential area to the north. So it's very much geared towards Bonita Beach Road and the commercial areas along Bonita Beach Road. You also have a driveway that is existing currently on Lime Street to access the property. At staff's request, that driveway was moved a little bit further north, and the reason why is because we don't want to run into any type of queuing issues with traffic on Bonita Beach Road. If you're traveling west on Beach Road to this intersection and you make a right onto Lime Street, there is no turn lane to do that. So we want to avoid an issue of having to worry about traffic that wants to come south on Lime Street versus traffic that's waiting to turn into the car wash. So to avoid potential queuing and backup effects on Beach Road, staff requested that they move the driveway slightly further to the north. And again, that was also part of a whole site circulation exercise that staff did with the applicant to sort of realign the site plan, switch the location of the building, the vacuum stations, and just sort of really work on the overall site functionality. This was a part of that taking place. And then you're also going to have, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me jump to the line of sight exhibits that were laid out before you by the applicant. So one of the things that staff requested to really get a better understanding of the potential visual impacts of this particular project was line of sight exhibits that we wanted the applicant to go ahead and provide. So they were able to provide exhibits from all sides for us, from Lime Street, from the north, and from Beach Road. So as you can see here, this shows where the potential wall would be located. What they're not showing here is that there would be additional landscaping on the wall, and then also additional landscaping near the property line as well on that northern side. to further provide a visual buffer as well as potential sound buffer as well on top of the wall and soundproofing. As far as the environmental considerations are concerned, there are no environmentally critical areas or natural resources that were observed on site. As part of the applicant's site plan, they are going to try and preserve certain heritage trees that were found to be on site. If they do have to remove any of those heritage trees, they first need to get approval from the Tree Advisory Board and work out a replanting plan, or a replacement plan, if you will, for any potential heritage trees that would potentially be removed as a result of this case. You also have required landscape buffers that are shown on your site plan, both on the Beach Road side and especially on the residential side to the north, and they are not requesting any deviations from those landscaping standards overall. There was a question about vehicle visibility as it relates to buffering. We already have a section in the code that deals with that. Essentially, with anything, whether it's a buffer, landscape buffer, a fence, whatever the case may be, the closer you get to an intersection, the lower the allowable height of those things to help avoid those vehicle and visibility conflicts. So there's a few different ways we can handle that during the development order stage. Typically what you do is you don't fence off or you don't buffer a 90-degree angle on a property at an intersection. You set it back and you buffer at a 45-degree angle, and you leave a triangle shape, if you will, completely unobstructed, specifically for vehicle visibility issues and potential pedestrian conflicts. So that's written into the code right now, so it's not something that we would need to condition further because they would already be required to do that. With regards to stormwater, the current discharge points that we understand are along the Bonita Beach Road right-of-way. So at this point, it's an exercise in moving the water that comes to the site, gets treated, and then discharged into the Bonita Beach Road right-of-way. One thing to keep in mind, and this is the case, citywide, not just this particular property, is that their stormwater plan and their management plan overall cannot negatively impact the adjacent properties. So you cannot force more water onto adjacent properties than is already currently happening. In fact, in most instances, what we see is when you improve these vacant sites and you actually grade the land appropriately, it becomes easier to move the water to where it needs to go. So from that perspective, you're going to see an improvement of the flow of water to the site, through the site, and off the site as part of the stormwater management plan. With regards to traffic, we heard a few different numbers that were thrown out. Our reading of the TIS and with our traffic engineer was that the peak hour was actually 78 trips overall. Either way, you're still talking about an impact of less than 1% from a level of service standpoint. But I think what we're sort of tussling with, based on what I'm hearing, is that it's not so much a capacity thing as it is a nuisance issue of these additional trips and where they would potentially end up. So one of the things that was brought up at the zoning board that the applicant explained was the advent of adding a sign that said no left turn onto Lime Street, which would prevent traffic from flowing north onto Lime Street. There was also discussion about putting in a raised median, or pork chop median as they're sometimes called, to literally force it so that you cannot turn left. You have to turn right because that's the way the median is going to force you to go. If that's something that's still on the table for consideration, staff doesn't completely object to it. I suppose one minor objection to consider would be that if you were to do that, you would be cutting off that neighborhood from being able to use this service because they wouldn't be able to make the left to go home. But again, if it's something that the applicant's in agreement with, if it's something that council wants, staff doesn't object to those types of considerations if council thinks it'll help. So the other thing to keep in mind is that you do have this Bonita Beach Road overlay, and on top of that you have the future land use of the property, which is commercial. So you have commercially zoned property in a commercial future land use area, and the request is for a commercial use. So from that standpoint, you don't really have any inconsistency issues with your long-range plan, your Bonita plan, which sets the long-term goals for property within the city. It doesn't negatively affect any of those particular aspects of the plan. Another aspect of the comprehensive plan that was studied very much, obviously, was the transportation element. which we talked about the traffic component, but the other thing to keep in mind is that you have a big push for multimodal facilities citywide. So even though this isn't a use that would necessarily be used by bicyclists or pedestrians, they're still going to be responsible for advocating for that infrastructure. So on their site plan, you will see that they are adding a sidewalk on Lime Street along their frontage to connect to the existing sidewalk along Bonita Beach Road, which will also be widened as a result of this project along their frontage. So they're making the necessary multimodal improvements as well, which are mandated by your comprehensive plan. The other elements that are in your comprehensive plan, staff didn't think were applicable to this case. There's an element about schools, about coastal management areas, things like that. None of those things really apply to this particular case, so those were the main elements that were focused on in the review by staff, and they are outlined in detail in your staff report. So with that, we have the special exception criteria, so we'll just go ahead and briefly go over what those criteria are. You have several of them to consider. All of them were reviewed in detail by staff and can be found in your staff report with the analysis. So one of the criteria is whether there exist changed or changing conditions that make the approval appropriate. B, C, and D have to do with testimony of the applicant from staff and from the general public to take into consideration. Whether the request is consistent with the goals, objectives, policies, and intent of the Bonita Plan. We just talked about that on the previous slide with regards to the future land use. It's commercial, it's zone commercial, the request is commercial. They're dealing with their traffic impacts accordingly as far as the code is concerned.
Mike?
Yes.
What are some other examples that would need a special exception?
So in Bonita Beach Road, your special exception uses tend to be geared towards uses that are more on the auto-centric side. So drive-throughs, car washes, things that have the focus more on vehicular traffic as the primary mode. Storage facilities, because those tend to also include, bigger trucks and trailers that need to go there to unload storage equipment and things like that. So that's where your beach road overlay tends to focus on for special exception purposes. So essentially what they're saying is, it's not that those uses aren't allowed, it's that they require an additional level of review to make sure they're being considered appropriately.
You don't have a list. You said
Yes, there's a table for the uses in the beach road overlay that outline which ones specifically require the special exception. So that was how they knew that they needed it, because when they went to the table, it showed that car wash required a special exception.
We're not picking on car washes.
No, there's a whole host of uses that would require special exception. It's not just that singular use, no sir. You also have criteria about protecting the environmentally critical areas, compatibility with existing or planned uses, and whether the request will cause damage, hazard, or nuisance to persons or property, and then overall compliance with the zoning provisions and supplemental regulations in the chapter. So I'll go ahead and go through the staff analysis of each of these one by one, starting with criteria A. So criteria A is where there exists changing or changed conditions that make the approval of the request appropriate. So from the staff perspective, this came about because of the 2019 rewrite of the Bonita Beach Road corridor. Prior to the 2019 rewrite of that code, asking for a special exception for a car wash wouldn't have been a permissible way to go. That's not how the code outlined it. So it was the advent of that code change that required the special exception to be reviewed by staff and ultimately either voted for approval or denial by city council. So effectively what happened was, the property was rezoned in 2019, if you will, into the commercial zone that then required special exceptions for certain uses, and that's where this one came in. So they went by the book as far as what they were supposed to do, and it's because that code change mandated them to do so. For the other criteria, B, C, and D, these have to do with testimonies of the applicant's staff and the public. So obviously you heard from the applicant, you're hearing from staff right now. You have the staff's report with analysis in front of you. You've heard from the public already. There were concerns addressed by the public, or raised by the public, should I say, related to traffic, noise, drainage, speeding cars. all those things were reviewed by staff within the purview of what we can review. So again, we already discussed what the traffic would be. With the noise, we feel that because of the noise study, along with the staff conditions that would require the wall and soundproofing on top of that, or should I say in addition to that, that we feel that that addresses that concern adequately. With regards to drainage, we've already touched on that about not negatively affecting your neighbors with additional runoff or drainage onto the property. This property is not special in that regard. They're not going to get any special treatment. They're not going to be able to negatively impact their neighbors when it comes to those things. With regards to speeding, that's not really within the purview of zoning per se. That's probably more of a Lee County Sheriff's Office issue. But with regards to understanding and trying to limit the number of cars that go through the neighborhood, again, we would submit the option of, doing the right turn only with the raised median that makes the cars turn right back out to Beach Road and not go through the neighborhood. With regards to consistency with the Bonita plan, we already discussed that briefly. The future land use of the property is general commercial. This is a commercial use in a general commercial future land use category, so we don't have any issues there. The project funds a fully constructed roadway. They're going to redo their access point to deal with queuing issues on Beach Road. They're going to be providing sidewalk improvements on Lime Street. There is no sidewalk there right now, so if anything, it's going to help relieve some potential hazards by creating a sidewalk on Lime Street along their frontage that will connect to the existing sidewalk infrastructure on Beach Road. So we do feel that they are successfully meeting the intent of that criteria. With regards to criteria F and G, these have to do with performance and locational standards and protecting environmental areas. There are no environmentally critical areas on site. There are no specific performance or locational standards overall for this particular use, so we don't see any conflicts with those criteria. And again, they're not going to be requesting any deviations or variances as part of this application. So they're going to be building it by the book as required by the Land Development Code.
Do you have any control over hours of operation?
So that is one of the conditions that we do have in there, would be the hours of operation. And I believe the request was 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
14 hours?
Correct, which is relatively standard for a use like that. And the reason why staff was comfortable with that had to do with the noise control ordinance that exists currently for the city. The allowable decibels changes at 10 p.m. So 10 p.m. is the cutoff time, if you will, within the city's noise control ordinance, where the decibel level drops as far as the amount of noise that you're allowed to make or produce. So from the staff,
Does it start up at 6?
it starts up at 7. So it's from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. is one set of decibel standards. From 10 p.m. to the following day at 7 a.m. is a separate set of standards with a much lowerable allowable decibel reading. So because they were shutting down business before the decibel standards changed at that 10 o'clock hour, plus the wall, plus the sound deadening, we felt the proposed hours of operation of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. were fine. We didn't have any concerns with those.
Any other questions? Yes, Nigel?
Yes, Mike, I had a question for you and then from the applicant or their representatives. The first one is, this is zone commercial, so say they didn't get through. Somebody could put a restaurant in there, no special exception, right? Unless
No.
it's fast food.
You're correct, and it'd only be actually for fast food too, if there was a drive-through, would actually be the trigger, because it's the auto-centric portion that would require the special exception. But you are correct, yes, if they wanted to put a full-size restaurant, a full-size medical office, things like that, retail, those are all things that are permitted by right, because those are the uses that you're trying to promote overall in your Beach Road corridor. But yes, those would.
The reason for my question is the hours thing. So
Sure.
restaurant goes in there, not shutting down at 9 o'clock at night. Traffic's going to be pretty much the same. The same ill-advised persons may be using Lime Street. These folks are going to be shutting down 9 o'clock at the latest, and as much as I wish everyone well, most of the car washes I've seen started at 9, then got down to 8 o'clock. But when they cease business, they're done.
Correct.
Restaurants can be open until, what are we at, 11, 12?
2 a.m.
That's the reasons for my questions.
I make a motion to approve.
I'd like to just,
Do we have a second? We have a second on that motion?
Jesse has a
just from
comment.
discussion standpoint, I wanted to, you noticed I got up. I didn't want to disrupt the hearing, but being that it's quasi judicial, I just wanted to explain where I went. I went and I spoke to the gentleman who did the petitions in the hat, and
Do we
essentially.
have a second? Did we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Okay.
And I was speaking to the man in the hat who put the petitions together, and essentially I was trying to see if there was a deal to be had, and I asked if Beach Road was taken off and they were open to it, would that make you more comfortable? And the answer to that was no. So, full disclosure, that's what was discussed. I was trying to see if there was a deal there. There's not a deal there. So that's what that was, just so everybody understands. Okay? All right. And then, are we gonna be able to speak when we vote? Because if not, I need to do this right now then.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so.
Motion and a second, you can comment. Go ahead.
I think that every now and then, the appropriate thing for the city is not the ideal outcome for your district, right? And as the representative of District 2, I represent Carl Circle, Dean, Pierce, Roslyn, Tangerine, Pendleton, Orange Blossom, Lance, and Lime. So with that being said, I'm out, folks. But I don't feel as if it's due to I don't think necessarily people are going to get what they want because there are uses that could be worse. As far as developers, we've had people who are significantly harder to deal with. I think if you would have, I don't know what to do in the sense of whatever you put there, you're going to be up against a ton of people who are going to have an issue with it. I do understand holistically, we put the Bonita Beach overlay in a position for a reason. So that's why I'm saying to you, how our government is set up locally is this. The mayor is the only one who is elected to represent the whole city. So what I'm saying is that if I were the mayor, I may have a harder time making the vote than I am right now. But being as I represent all of those streets, I gotta be with my folks. And that's just where I'm at.
I'm sorry, where are you at?
Because you seconded the motion.
I seconded the motion, yes. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Wait, to approve it? No,
Yeah,
to
that's
vote on it.
Huh?
No, I motion to approve.
Oh, no. Okay, so yes, I take that second back. I don't second.
Wait, our attorney's speaking.
You can second a motion and not vote for the motion.
Right, that's what I was doing. I was saying we can vote on it. I wasn't saying that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Then we stop, we can continue discussion, but we are moving to take a vote.
Yes.
Who's running the meeting?
It's kind of an awkward way to do it.
So the motion is to approve.
Motion is to approve.
And it's
I'll second that motion.
Wait, the motion is to
Already been
approve?
seconded.
I take my motion back then if that's the
Then
motion.
Nigel seconds
Yes,
it.
no.
Nigel seconded.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Carr,
Yes.
Mayor Steinmeier,
No.
Councilmember Corey,
No.
Councilmember Fullick,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Forbes, Councilmember Bogas,
Yes.
Councilmember Purdon.
Yes, 4-3.
Motion passed?
Yes. It passed.
Next is the consent agenda.
Okay.
So congratulations, gentlemen,
Thank you.
Sorry, folks.
and good luck.
Okay, you're not Tommy. Are you Tommy? I'm not Tommy. Okay. Congratulations. Okay, consent agenda, number 10A through D, motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any comments? Roll call, please.
Mayor Steinmeier,
Aye.
Councilmember Corey,
Aye.
Councilmember Fullick,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes,
Aye.
Councilmember Bogas,
Aye.
Councilmember Purdon, Councilmember Carr.
Aye.
Okay, 11A,
We have a quick bathroom break.
pardon me?
We have a quick bathroom break.
I'm-
Go-
Do we have a
a
break
quick
for bathroom?
bathroom break? Quick one.
A break, a break.
Break.
Yes, restroom.
Yes, we're back at 7:30.
Perfect.
Thank you.